The stars burned cold above the bridge of the Imperial dreadnought Prometheus as Admiral Chen Wei stood watching the tactical display. 17 alien species had gathered their combined fleets at the edge of the Sol system. More than 40,000 warships from across the galaxy now pointed their weapons at humanity's home. The universe had finally decided that Earth needed to die. Chen Wei did not blink. He had served the Imperial fleet for 30 years. He had fought pirates in the asteroid belts and hunted raiders beyond Neptune. But nothing in his long career had prepared him for this moment. The entire galaxy had united against his people. Every species that could build a starship had sent their vessels to join the coalition of the unified stars. They called themselves the Purifiers. Their mission was simple: end humanity before humanity ended them. The communication officer turned from her station. Her face was pale, but her voice remained steady. "Admiral, we are receiving a transmission from the Coalition flagship. They demand our immediate surrender. They say they will spare our civilian population if we lower our shields and accept their terms." Chen Wei smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had already calculated every possible outcome and found one path through the darkness. What are their terms exactly? The officer swallowed hard. Complete disarmament. Dismantling of all shipyards. Permanent occupation of Earth and all colonies. Genetic modification to reduce human aggression. And the execution of all military personnel above the rank of captain. The bridge fell silent. Every officer understood what those terms meant. Slavery dressed in diplomatic language. The death of everything that made humanity what it was. Chen Wei walked to the main viewport and stared at the distant lights of the enemy fleet. They think we are cornered. They think that because they outnumber us 50-1, victory is certain. They have forgotten something important about humans. "What is that, Admiral?" "What is that, Admiral?" his first officer asked. "We have been fighting each other for 100,000 years. We have survived ice ages and plagues and wars that killed millions. Every time the universe tried to destroy us, we came back stronger. These aliens have known peace for millennia. Their empires grew fat and lazy while we were still learning how to sharpen stones. They do not understand what they have awakened." The Admiral turned back to his officers. He activated the fleet-wide communication channel. His voice would reach every ship in the Imperial fleet. All 200 vessels that stood between Earth and extinction. "This is Admiral Chen Wei. You all know why we are here. The galaxy has decided that humanity is too dangerous to live. They fear our growth. They fear our creativity. They fear that one day we will surpass them all. And they are right to be afraid." He paused to let his words sink in. "But they have made a mistake. They think that numbers alone can defeat us. They have gathered 17 different species with 17 different leaders and 17 different agendas. They call themselves united, but they are held together only by fear. Fear of us, and we are going to use that fear to tear them apart?" The tactical officer brought up a detailed analysis of the coalition fleet. The Admiral had spent 3 months preparing for this moment. His intelligence officers had worked tirelessly to understand every species in the enemy alliance. They had mapped their rivalries, their old wars, their territorial disputes. The coalition was not a true alliance. It was a temporary gathering of ancient enemies who hated each other almost as much as they hated humanity. The Vorthik and the Krellian Dominion had fought 6 wars over mining rights in the Outer Rim. The Selenari and the Molthari had a blood feud that dated back 10,000 years. The Crystalline Collective had once tried to absorb the Nabari Consortium into their hive mind. Every species in the coalition had reasons to distrust every other species. They had only put aside their differences because they believed humanity was an even greater threat. Chen Wei intended to remind them of their old hatreds. "Launch the Shadow Protocol," he ordered. Across the fleet, special operations teams activated their systems. For months, Imperial intelligence had been infiltrating the coalition communication networks. They had planted false evidence, fake transmissions, and manufactured intelligence. Now it was time to release the poison. The first transmissions went out to the Vorthic commanders. Intercepted messages appeared to show that the Krellian Dominion was planning to seize Vorthic territory once the humans were defeated. The evidence was flawless. The Vorthic High Command would have no reason to doubt its authenticity. Similar messages reached every faction in the coalition. The Selenari learned that the Molthari were planning to assassinate their queen after the battle. The Crystalline Collective received intelligence showing that the Nabari were developing weapons specifically designed to shatter their crystalline bodies. Every old wound was reopened. Every buried suspicion was confirmed. Within hours, the coalition fleet was in chaos. Commanders demanded explanations. Accusations flew across communication channels. The Vorthic admiral threatened to withdraw his ships if the Krellian did not explain certain troop movements near their border. The Molthari flagship powered up its weapons and aimed them at the Selenari cruisers. Chen Wei watched the confusion spread with grim satisfaction. But he knew that false intelligence alone would not be enough. The coalition leaders would eventually realize they had been manipulated. He needed to strike while they were distracted. All ships, prepare for Operation Divide and Conquer. We are going to hit them where they least expected. The Imperial fleet began to move, but instead of charging directly at the enemy, they split into 7 separate battle groups. Each group had a specific target. Each group knew exactly which faction they were assigned to provoke. The first battle group, led by the destroyer Relentless, made a daring run at the Vorthic formation. They fired a precise barrage that destroyed 3 Vorthic patrol ships, then immediately retreated. But their trajectory carried them directly through the Krellian defensive perimeter. To the Vorthic, it looked like the Krellian had allowed the humans to attack them. The Vorthic commander did not wait for explanations. His people had been fighting the Krellian for centuries. The old hatred was too strong. He ordered his ships to fire on the nearest Krellian vessels. The Krellian responded immediately. Within minutes, 2 of the largest factions in the coalition were at war with each other. Chen Wei pressed the advantage. The second battle group hit the Molthari formation and then led pursuing ships directly into Selenari space. The ancient blood feud erupted into open combat. The third battle group created a similar incident between the Crystalline Collective and the Nabari. The coalition was tearing itself apart. 40,000 ships that had come to destroy Earth were now fighting each other. Old enemies remembered why they had hated each other for millennia. The thin bond of their alliance shattered like glass. But not all the coalition commanders were blind to the manipulation. Grand Admiral Dex of the Regulan Empire understood what the humans were doing. He was one of the few leaders intelligent enough to see past his own prejudices. He broadcast an emergency message to the entire coalition fleet. "Stop fighting. The humans are manipulating us. Can you not see what they are doing? They are using our own divisions against us. We must unite, or we will all die." Some ships listened. The Regulan formation held its discipline. So did several other minor factions. Nearly 8,000 vessels stopped fighting each other and reformed into a coherent attack force. Dex led them personally toward the human defensive line. Chen Wei had expected this. He had hoped to break the entire coalition, but he knew that some enemies would remain focused. The Regulan Empire had always been the most dangerous member of the alliance. They were cold, logical, and not easily deceived. All hands, prepare for close combat. This is what we trained for. The Imperial fleet, still outnumbered 40-1 by the remaining enemy force, moved to intercept. The human ships were smaller and fewer, but they had one advantage that no other species could match. They had been designed for war by a species that had practiced war for 100,000 years. Human ships were brutal, efficient, and built to take punishment. Their shields were thicker. Their weapons were deadlier. Their crews had trained in simulations that would have driven alien sailors insane. Every human officer had studied the tactics of Alexander, Napoleon, and Sun Tzu. They understood war in a way that these peaceful aliens could never comprehend. The battle was savage. The Regulan ships were formidable enemies. They fought with discipline and courage. But the humans fought with something more. They fought with the desperate fury of a species that had clawed its way up from the mud of a single planet. They fought knowing that everyone they loved was counting on them. Admiral Chun Wei led the charge personally. The Prometheus plunged into the heart of the enemy formation, its weapons blazing. The dreadnought smashed through a Regulan cruiser and kept moving. Human ships died, but they took 10 times their number with them. The battle lasted for 7 hours. When it finally ended, the Regulan fleet had been shattered. Grand Admiral Vex was dead, his flagship reduced to floating debris. The other factions had either destroyed each other or fled back to their own territories. Of the 40,000 ships that had come to destroy Earth, less than 2,000 escaped. The human fleet had lost 70% of its vessels. Admiral Chen Wei's ship was heavily damaged. But the Sol system was safe. The communication officer reported that messages were coming in from across the galaxy. The coalition was dissolving. Former members were blaming each other for the disaster. Some were already threatening new wars. The alliance that had taken 10 years to build had collapsed in a single day. Chun Wei allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. He had gambled everything on humanity's oldest weapon. Not technology, not firepower, understanding. He had understood his enemies better than they understood themselves. He had known their weaknesses because humans had the same weaknesses: tribalism, pride, ancient grudges that never truly healed. The aliens had tried to unite against humanity, but they had forgotten that unity requires trust, and trust requires time. They had been enemies for millennia before they became allies. One small push was all it took to remind them of that fact. "Admiral," the communication officer said, "Earth is sending their congratulations. The Prime Minister wants to speak with you." Chun Wei shook his head. "Later. Right now, I need to think." He walked to the viewport again and stared at the stars. The galaxy was vast and filled with species that feared humanity. This battle was only the beginning. More enemies would come. More alliances would form against Earth. But Chun Wei was not worried. Humanity had survived everything the universe had thrown at it. They would survive this too. Because no matter how many enemies gathered against them, humans would always find a way. They would adapt. They would learn. They would turn their enemy's strength into weakness. That was what it meant to be human. That was why the galaxy would never be able to stop them. The Prometheus began its slow journey home. Behind it, the wreckage of the coalition fleet drifted silently in the void. A reminder to the universe that humanity was not prey. They were the predators. And they had only just begun to hunt.